The carnivore diet is unique because, unlike any other way of eating, it has its own maintenance program built into it. Hey, what's shaking bacon? My name is Bruno Panucci. I hope you're doing well. So lots of people turn to a carnivore diet for weight loss. Some people turn to it for athletic performance. Some people turn to it just to see if they can up their game, just to see if they could feel better day to day. They want to know what it's like being fat adapted, or they've heard say they're already doing a healthy version of keto or some other way of eating. And they're like, I haven't been doing as good as I want on this. I want to up my game and see if I could do better. No matter what your background is, when people do a carnivore diet, the people who can stick with it, because it's difficult dealing with sugar and carbohydrate addiction, that's probably the number one reason why people have a hard time starting a carnivore diet. Now, when you do a carnivore diet long enough, that tends to iron itself out, as well as a lot of eating issues that people have with past eating disorders like binge eating disorders or emotional eating, or different things that turn people to huge meals that get them off their diet, just giving into that sugar and carbohydrate addiction. But the interesting thing about carnivore is it has its own maintenance program built into it intuitively. And that's what I find surprising about it. So when you do a carnivore diet, it's difficult in the beginning. It really can be, because you're breaking up with carbohydrates. One, there's lots of fake processed foods you can eat when you do different ways of eating out there. And that tends to be counterproductive because, anyone who's having a whole food diet of any type of food, generally they're going to do better than when they're on a standard American diet. But when people turn to carnivore to lose weight, what happens is those emotional eating issues and binge eating issues tend to iron themselves out, usually within months, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes it's within years, but even if they're not gone, they're way better than they were. So when you turn to a carnivore diet and you eliminate all those addictive foods out of your diet, because they simply break down to sugar in your body and feeds that dopamine hit that your brain's requiring, when all that goes away, you're typically doing really well. You start on a maintenance program, and we're going to talk about lots of different ways, whatever diet someone's doing, why they have a rough time maintaining that afterwards. I'll take something like keto as an example. I personally don't think staying at an 80-20 ratio is really a good idea. You might feel better in some ways, but if you're not weight training, I think it's not enough protein for the average person that leads a sedentary lifestyle, and you're going to lose lean mass and bone density. But if you're doing that and you're weight training, I think you're probably okay. If you're not active, I think it's going to be tough to maintain something like a keto diet or a carnivore diet that's extremely high fat for too long. If you're doing it temporarily for a particular window of time because you're trying to overcome a particular obstacle, whether it's a plateau or you're having, like in my case, I did it because I was trying to manage my insulin resistance, I think there's a time and place to experiment with something like that. But aside from that, we're going to go into a few generally recommended topics to help maintain a diet, any diet. And we're going to see how it reflects well with a carnivore diet, because when people do a carnivore diet, they find it easy to stick with once they've been consistent with it for a while. Often what happens, like any way of eating, when you clean up your diet, you start to lose weight. When you start to lose weight, your sleep can get a lot better. And one thing people might do is play around with their macros a little bit more now that they're only down to fat and protein. And they might try and find a sweet spot that helps them sleep. There's ways to tweak a carnivore diet to be more advantageous for you, and everyone's different. So you can't look at someone else and what they're doing and think that it's bad or no good, or it's like something you should do. It's something you need to experiment with so you can learn more about yourself. There's lots of long-term carnivores that are still learning different ways to do carnivore and applying it just to see the results that they offer. So right off the bat, when your sleep is better, it's easier to maintain your stress, and it's easier to maintain a carnivore diet because you're eating till you're satiated all the time. And that leads us into our next two topics, managing stress. When your sugar is balanced and everything's feeling good, and therefore because your sugar is balanced, you're not having emotional highs and lows through the days, what happens is stress doesn't affect you the same way it used to affect you before. So now that your stress is managed, you're also sleeping better, and all these other issues that you have in your day-to-day life are being managed better. So the one nice thing about the carnivore diet is it indirectly affects your stress. You can see so many people who do a carnivore diet. Go to Rivero.com. People who have managed their anxiety and stress, lifelong problems that they've had to deal with through a carnivore diet, most of those issues got managed extremely well or completely went away. You also learn how to control your eating on a carnivore diet. You learn to get more in tune with your hunger signals. So when you're not so hungry, you don't need as much. If there's one thing I've noticed, and most long-term strict carnivores have noticed, is you can't really eat till you get full. You can eat till you get satiated, but not necessarily to when you're full. And I find that really interesting because for years, I never knew there was a difference, but there is. When I used to have carbohydrates in my diet, I could eat a ton of food. I'm sure almost everyone out there can relate. You could just binge out on something you shouldn't have done, whether it was junk food or it was just like a carb heavy meal like pizza. And you could eat to the point where you're like, oh, I can't eat anymore. And you feel like garbage afterwards because you're eating before you realize how full you were. And everything was still expanding in your stomach. So by the time that really hit and everything started to swell, too late, damage is done. And now you've overeaten. With a carnivore diet, you get to a point, I know I have, where no matter how much you're trying to eat, because man, that food is good and you're really hungry and maybe you worked up a good appetite, you just get to the point where you're like, no, I just can't eat anymore. Someone might ask, are you full? And you're like, no, I'm not full. I just can't eat anymore. And I noticed the fattier the meat, the less I need to eat. The leaner the meat, the more I can eat. But either way, I still can't eat till I'm stuffed. I just eat to the point where I can't eat anymore. I feel satiated. You get more in tune with your hunger signals. And because of that, your emotional eating is better. As well as when you're sticking to straight carnivore, for those of you who like to have little snacks here and there, and you make them carnivore snacks, well, life suddenly got pretty easy. Yes, it's a little bit of work as far as having to keep food in the fridge, but that's with any way of eating. Finding food that's always around that you can grab. The nice thing is there's always a fast food restaurant not far by, and there's always a grocery store. So you can always go somewhere and get something whole, and sometimes even pre-cooked, to help maintain a carnivore diet. And along with that, another thing is shopping smart. It's very affordable to maintain a carnivore diet because when you start finding out what the regular prices are for food and you start making a goal of buying food only on sale, you can save a lot of money and maybe only eat for anywhere between $10 to $15 a day. If you have the money, you can have a huge steak every day, a nice ribeye at $20 a pound. It's your choice. But the food tastes so good, and especially when you get better cooking all these different foods, you feel like you could be eating at a 5-star restaurant every single day of the week. When I started cooking my steaks with a sous vide machine, oh man, I was cooking steaks that tasted as good or better than lots of these 5-star really ritzy restaurants like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, because I was just doing the same thing that they were doing. I was doing a reverse sear. It was easy. It didn't even feel like cooking because really it's not. And oh man, best steak I've ever had by far. And of course, with any healthy way of eating, you always start paying more attention to the amount of water you're getting and the amount of exercise you're getting and just movement in general. So those are two staples that really aren't necessarily part of a carnivore diet, but go along with any healthy lifestyle choice. Lots of these different ways of eating, when you cut out meat or you cut down on meat dramatically or you cut down on fat dramatically, you become like a person who's swimming and you can only keep your head underwater for so long. And eventually you bob up and that's when you binge. You binge on something that you shouldn't. But when you're eating food that's nutrient dense and readily available because you're smart and you keep it stocked up in your fridge, then all of a sudden life gets a heck of a lot easier. So those are just some of the ways people can maintain a carnivore diet, get down to a healthy weight or a certain athletic performance, and find it easy to maintain. Because the best part is, once you have your maintenance program and you know what you eat and you know what you like, it's easy to just keep on doing it. So I hope this video found you well. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up and hit the little bell notification. I really appreciate that. A lot of people have been telling me they're not getting notifications about my videos. Anyway, thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video to the end. Thanks a lot.